Our topic for today is sustainable happiness, and in all honesty, I can't imagine a more important topic. Let me put it to you bluntly. We will either find sustainable happiness or perish as a species on this planet. I want to talk a little bit about what I mean by happiness. I want to illustrate that. I suppose that most of you have personal heroes, and mine was a man named David Brower. He was perhaps the most effective and famous environmentalist of the 20th century. He built the Sierra Club, he founded Friends of the Earth, and I knew him for some 28 years until he died in the year 2000. And I remember, most of all, a time I spent with him about a week before he died. It was at a place called Alta Bates Hospital in Berkeley, California. He was weakened by cancer. The end was clearly near. And I tried to cheer things up. And as I left, I said, "Well, David, I hope that the next time I see you, you'll be out there again, healthy, and fighting the good fight." And he looked me directly in the eye, and he said, "I don't think that's in the cards, but it's been a great 88 years. I think that's what we all want to say. I think that's what happiness is, a satisfied life, a life of making a difference, not a killing. David Brower did that. I think he lived a happy life, but he died a troubled individual because he worried about the generations that were to follow. He gave oftentimes what he called his sermon, and I want to summarize that little speech for you right now. In the sermon, David Brower takes the age of the Earth, estimated by scientists at some 4.6 billion years, and he compresses it into the biblical week of creation. 7 days, Earth starts on Sunday morning, life arrives on Tuesday. In the next few days, it becomes more diverse and more wondrous, and on the final day, Saturday, those big beasts, the dinosaurs, arrive at about 10 o'clock in the morning. They have a long run. They're on the planet till 3 in the afternoon when an asteroid ends their visit. At 3 minutes before midnight, on the final night, Saturday night, human beings, us, Homo sapiens, appear on the planet. At 1/4 of a second before midnight on that final night, the Industrial Revolution begins. At 1/100th of a second before midnight, this thing we call the consumer society that we've been part of, the society of stuff, the society since World War II, begins. And Brower says in that 1/100th of a second, we have managed to use more resources than all of humanity who ever lived before then used all put together. We have depleted our fisheries and our soils by half. We are causing the extinction of many species, and we are dramatically changing the climate. And he went on to say, there are people who believe that what we've been doing for that last 1/100th of a second can go on indefinitely. They are considered normal, intelligent, reasonable people, but they are stark, raving mad. I think we have to think about that because it tells us, what can we do? We can't grow on the way we're growing on. We have to find happiness in a sustainable way. If all the Earth were to suddenly adopt the American standard of living, scientists say we would need 5 planets to provide the resources and to absorb the waste. David Brower was born in 1912, 100 years ago this year. It was the year that an incident occurred that is remembered all over the world. You remember that big ship, the luxury liner, the Titanic, the biggest luxury liner ever built to that point, invincible, unsinkable. It set sail from Southampton in England on its maiden voyage to North America, and on the night of April 14th, 1912, that great ship was humbled by a block of ice and sent to a watery grave at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean drowning more than 1,500 people, and proving that bigger isn't always better, and also I would say that nature bats last. But I think the Titanic is more than that. I think it's a metaphor for our economy today, our enormous extractive economy based on the idea that bigger is always better, an economy, a society that is cruising blindly toward a collision with the limits of the earth. So we need to turn that ship around. We need to do it now. To begin with, we need to get a better idea of how we measure progress. And currently, we do it with this thing we call the gross domestic product. You've heard of that. The grosser it gets, the better we assume the economy to be. The gross domestic product is the market value of the goods and services that we produce. If it sells, it counts, it's positive. So the cost of cleaning up oil spills, the cost of treating cancer, the cost of expensive legal bills associated with divorce, all of those things are a plus when it comes to the GDP, though we might not consider them such. On the other hand, there are many important things that it doesn't count, all of which contribute to our happiness. Volunteering, hugely important. Time spent with friends and family. Time spent walking, appreciating nature. Time in your garden. All of these things are a waste of time as far as the GDP is concerned. Maybe Bobby Kennedy put it best when he said, "It measures, in short, everything except that which makes life worthwhile." Today, a significant revolt is taking place against the GDP. It started in an unlikely place, a tiny country tucked between China and India, a country of 700,000 people called Bhutan. Many of you have probably heard of it. In 1972, the then coronated king of Bhutan, only 16 years old, Jigme Wangchuck, was asked by an Australian reporter, "So, King, what are you going to do to increase your country's gross national product?" That's what we called it at that time. And King Wangchuck thought about that for a minute, and he turned to the reporter and he said, "Sir, in my humble opinion, gross national happiness is more important than gross national product." And for 40 years, the Bhutanese have been trying to figure out how to make people happier. They have brought scientists from around the world, and they have figured a lot of things that have led us to a very important science of happiness and an understanding that happiness is very dependent on things like social connection, security, gratitude, altruism. It's not just about the stuff and about the money. The work begun in Bhutan is leading to projects around the world. The United Nations has urged all member countries to make the pursuit of happiness their goal and to find ways to measure that. We are working in this in many ways. I've been very delighted to be, for the past couple of years, a part of the Happiness Initiative led by Laura Musikansky, who will be the MC for the second part of this program. It's an effort to promote and strengthen well-being in all of our communities. And we Americans need this initiative most of all. We have the biggest gross domestic product, but we have the poorest health and the highest level of depression among wealthy nations. We kill each other. We kill each other 5 times as often as people in other rich nations. The Happiness Initiative is based on a short survey which measures 10 domains or areas of well-being, 10 areas that are important if we are to live happy lives. They include money, financial security, yes indeed, but they also include, and you can see some in the back of the room, health, physical and mental, education and access to nature, and access to arts and culture, social support and community vitality, hugely important, environmental quality and access to nature, confidence in government, satisfaction with our work, and time balance. Check it out and bring this initiative to your community. You might also want to join colleges and communities around the United States next April 13th in celebrating what we call Pursuit of Happiness Day. It's the birthday of Thomas Jefferson, who immortalized those words in our Declaration of Independence. When we examine the survey results from the thousands of people who have taken the survey in the United States, we find the lowest scores in this area called time balance. And that's not a surprise in a nation that has some of the longest working hours on Earth. I would submit that sustainable happiness depends on time, on trading our gains in productivity for time instead of simply more and more money. We have an enormously productive economy, and we are becoming more productive, being able to produce more, faster and faster all the time. That gives us a real choice. We can use those gains in productivity to make and consume more stuff, as we have been doing, or we can use those gains to have more leisure time for our families, for exercise, for volunteering, for taking care of all of those other things, and for taking care of this planet of ours for which there is no spare. We can thereby simultaneously reduce our impact on the environment, increase our enjoyment, increase employment, improve our health, and strengthen our social connections. We can actually become happier by working less and sharing work among all of us. And some will say, oh, we're really happy because we work so much, you know, we're so productive in all of this. But I would submit that, in fact, when we look at Gallup's results of the happiest nations in the world, and Gallup does an annual poll surveying countries around the world, we find that the world's happiest countries are actually those countries where people work the least. They have the smallest gap between rich and poor. They take care of people. Gallup also does a daily survey of 1,000 Americans and asks them at different times during the day and the week how happy they are. Now, you're going to be in for a little surprise, so it's a good thing all of you are seated, because I'm about to shock you. Gallup finds that Americans, are you ready for this? Gallup finds that Americans are 20% happier on weekends than on work days. And 30 to 40% happier on holidays than on work days. Now, the rest of the world understands this connection. It knows the importance of time, but sadly, we Americans still don't get it, and here's an example of that. I've been involved with an organization that's tried to work for more time called Take Back Your Time, and in 2009, we launched a campaign to create a vacation law in the United States. There are only, count them, only 5 countries in the entire world that have no law mandating at least some paid vacation time for workers. They are the United States, Suriname, Guyana, Nepal, and that paragon of human rights, Burma or Myanmar. That's it. In most other rich countries, a month is typical, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and so forth. So we put a bill into Congress in 2009 called the Paid Vacation Act, a very modest bill. It would have given Americans 1 to 2 weeks off, paid days, guaranteed, depending on the size of the business that they worked for. It would have been seen as laughable in any other rich country. But you would have thought, by the reaction that we got, that we were demanding the end of Western civilization as we know it. The reaction was immediate. What will that do to the economy? It's going to destroy the economy. How can we possibly compete in the global economy if we give people 1 or 2 weeks of vacation time? Notwithstanding the fact that every single country we compete with does a whole lot more than that. And I think the most fun part of this was when I was on Fox News, and I was accused of sort of, the host pointed to me and said, you want to turn America into a 21st century France. As if we were going to force everyone to appreciate good food and wine. But this is it. I mean, It's really kind of crazy. So I want to say that we need to think about how we can be happier, how we can have time, how we can do these kind of things. And we need to look back again a little bit at history. You know, the philosopher George Santayana once said that those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. You've probably heard that. But it's also important to remember the past sometimes so that we can repeat it. And what I'd like you to do is to take you back for one more story, again to the year 1912, exactly 100 years ago, to the January 11th of that year, when thousands of workers, most of them women and most of them immigrants, walked out of the textile mills of a city called Lawrence, Massachusetts, to march in the streets of that city, demanding an increase in their wages from 16 to 18 cents an hour and a decrease in their working hours from 56 to 54 per week. And the story goes that as those women marched in that cold street, some of them carried in front of them a banner which read, "We want bread and roses too." We often think of this as the bread and roses strike. The bread was the symbol of higher wages. Bread, money. In fact, it meant 4 loaves of bread for their families a week to have that little bit of extra pay. But the women understood that life is not lived by bread alone, that we need the non-material things in life. We need the shorter hours, the time to smell the roses, the time, in the words of the song that immortalizes that event, time for art, for love, for beauty, their drudging spirits never knew. These women 100 years ago, as poor as they were, understood that life is about more than money, that happiness is about all of those non-material things, and all of them require time. In the past 100 years, I think we've forgotten that, and especially since World War II, when all the emphasis has come on how much money we can make, how rich we are, and we have left the roses to wilt. If we want to achieve sustainable happiness, I would submit it's time to water the roses again. Thank you.